Very warm welcome to everyone, and many thanks to the Marché for hosting our panel this morning. I just need to flag that there's a QR code on the lectern, so if you scan that, you will seamlessly be able to follow the ongoing sessions at this stage with automatic transcripts of speakers' dialogue. I'm Sarah Wybrew, the Director of Skills and Workforce Development at the British Film Institute, the UK's lead organisation for film and the moving image. I am a white Anglo-Middle Eastern woman in my mid-40s. I am of petite build, with straight dark brown hair that sits above my shoulders. I have a fringe and I'm dressed in black jeans and a black jacket. This session is dedicated to the theme of good work. Good work is a collective term used to describe fair and decent working conditions where everyone in the workplace is treated with dignity and respect. I appreciate recent news coming into this year's festival has further shone a light on instances of alleged sexual assault in our industry. I'm sure we all agree any such behaviours are inexcusable, dangerous and archaic. To note, this session is looking at all the factors that define and lead to good work practices. We know the quality of people's work impacts on people's health and happiness, and better designed work is known to get the best out of people, in turn improving productivity. Adhering to good work principles helps retain talent and make sure the doors to our workforce are wide open to and welcoming of everyone, enabling the workforce to become truly representative of society. In summary, good work is good for business. UK research shows that fair and decent work that ensures scope for development and fulfilment should include everyone and must cover all forms of employment, making taxation and work-related entitlements more consistent for all types of workers, including the self-employed. Offer opportunities for genuine two-way flexibility in working patterns. Ensure the law provides effective rights and protections for all types of workers, helping to make workplaces safer, kinder and equal for all. Enable responsible corporate governance, good management and strong employment relations, engaging all types of workers and ensuring they have a voice at all stages of a career. Good work conditions strengthen future work prospects and enhance people's capabilities through work-related learning and training. It supports a proactive approach to workplace health, recognising that the shape and content of work and individual health and well-being are strongly related. And good work supports fair pay for fair work, with clear and visible progression routes, with equal opportunity to boost earning power. The BFI is committed to undertaking work and investing in activities that seek to support the industry to improve working conditions, so the sector's cultures and operating practices, including how and who we recruit, how people are managed, working time and day-to-day behaviours can start to match the reputation that our creative content holds, in turn further strengthening our industry. Supporting cultural change is a challenge and it requires collective endeavour. In our role as conduit between industry and government, the BFI hopes to shape policy interventions in this area through research, listening to the different needs across our industry, and by galvanising and supporting the industry to benefit from positive changes, such as those already being brought about through the adoption of our anti-bullying and harassment principles and diversity standards. Today, we're going to hear about work that is underway in different parts of the world to aid good work practices. But I think all of us on the panel recognise that the topic of good work is complex and that the interventions needed in different parts of the world vary, and that reaching a consensus on what good work looks like globally will take time. So we're going to be reflecting on the things that we could be doing to get us closer to meeting this ambition. We are joined today by three fantastic female leaders from our industry: Gráinne Brunsdon, Chief Operating Officer at Screen Australia; Philippa Childs, Head of BEC2 UK; and Agnes Tulliot, Deputy Secretary General at the CNC here in France. I'd now like to invite each panel member to fully introduce themselves and share their initial reflections on what good work means to them and why it matters.
Good morning. I'm Philippa Childs, the head of BEC2. BEC2 represents crew in the UK, but also we've got members who work across theatre, live events, film and TV broadcasters. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. Philippa Childs. I am a white woman in my early 60s. I have short grey hair and I'm wearing glasses and a black dress. I think why is good work important to me? Because our members talk about the challenges of working in this industry a lot to us, and whilst it's obviously a very exciting industry for people to work in, it is also incredibly challenging. It's incredibly challenging because of the long hours culture. It's incredibly challenging because so many people are freelancers within the industry and have to navigate the peaks and troughs of work. And it's incredibly important because, I think probably globally we all struggle with the issues around bullying and harassment in the industry, and a real challenge around making our industry really inclusive and diverse. And all of those things are extremely important to me and extremely important to BEC2 members. So this project is a really fantastic one, and I think it's born out of, and I hope it follows the pattern of, some brilliant collaboration that has happened in the UK involving all of us, all stakeholders across the industry, who really have a commitment to want to make the industry better for its workforce.
Thank you. Agnes.
Hello, I'm Agnès Tulliot. I'm a Deputy General Secretary at the CNC here in France. I'm a 50-year-old white woman with dark hair. I'm wearing dark trousers and a colorful jacket. At the General Secretariat at the CNC, we pilot transversal topics such as CSR, labor law and employment policies, and also the prevention of sexual and gender-based violence. What could be relevant to know about me is that I started my career as a labor inspector. Good work for me would mean respecting labor law and collective agreements that we have here in France. There's lots of protections, lots of rights in the law and in the collective agreements. And so I think if we started by respecting all of them, the places would be good places to work.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gráinne Brunsdon. I'm COO at Screen Australia, which is the federal film agency in Australia. Each state has its own screen funding agency, and Screen Australia is the national body. I'm a white middle-aged woman. I've got black glasses on, a floral shirt, blue jacket, and a black skirt, which sounds like it doesn't work together, but there you go. It's only when you say it out loud. Why is this important to us? I think in Australia we have a screen industry that's quite like a lot of other territories that has been very male-dominated for a very long time. The numbers, when we did, there was a big survey done in 2014 of the participation of women and female key creatives in the screen sector, and it hadn't really changed for about 30 years. largely it was white, young men under the age of 30. They lived in Bondi. We knew what schools they'd gone to. We knew, kind of where they sent their kids to school, and it really hadn't changed for 30 years. So there were a lot of interventions that came into play, and Screen Australia was a large part of that. We have a Gender Matters task force, and its KPIs have changed from being about female participation to being about female and gender diverse participation as key creatives in the workplace, and we track that through all of our development and production. And we're also looking at heads of departments. So who gets to tell the stories, who gets their art on screen, and which for us is about in 50 years' time, whose work tells the story of Australian stories. And that needs to be very inclusive. We're doing a lot of work in the disability part of the sector as well. In Australia, 1 in 5 people identify as having a disability. That's not the case when we survey the screen sector, both in front of and behind the camera. So we're doing a lot of work in that space too. We do some research around this. We've done a thing called Seeing Ourselves, which we did in 2016, which really did a survey of who's on our screens and who's behind the screens telling those stories, and looked through a number of diversity metrics. We did that again last year to see what's changed. Disability is still the area that needs to change. One of the great growth areas is First Nations people and their stories, and we check it against the census. So when there's a census every 4 years, then we do this survey. In terms of working conditions, diversity is not the only thing. Obviously, this is traditionally a sector that sometimes plays a bit fast and loose. There are now some federal workplace relations laws that have come into place, which is great and will make positive change for the industry. But what we're seeing is that the industry is largely out of step with a new generation of workers. People are not willing to do those kind of long hours for little pay and little reward in circumstances where they don't have the kind of the agency that they might wish to have. So I think change is being forced upon the industry, and that's not a bad thing. And obviously work safety should be a human right, that you go to work and you're able to come home safely at night. And that, that's not always the case certainly in this sector, in some parts of it. So we are very committed to working with industry bodies across Australia to help make this happen.
Thank you. And actually, just building on that really detailed intro, thank you so much. It would be great to explore a bit further what we think the reasons are for some of the operating cultures and practices that we have in production. Why is it as challenging as it is?
Yeah, I guess, there are a number of factors, but undoubtedly production budgets are always quoted as being part of the challenge, and I guess they are. I sort of feel, in a way, that the industry has sort of got into bad habits, and actually, if you're talking about good work, it's really not necessarily about doing everything at the fastest pace possible, working the longest hours possible, and actually perhaps the industry should take a breath, step back a bit, and think about how to work better and smarter rather than to put so much pressure on all involved in a production.
Thank you.
I think what we've found sometimes is that production budgets, like Philippa has said, budgets are being more pressured, but rather than taking pages out of the script or changing the actual production, the pressure is being put on crew to deliver something at the same scale, at the same idea that it was originally, but for a lesser budget. And so it's about working faster, working longer, and the pressure really gets on the crew rather than the producers making those changes at the top to change to those circumstances. So schedules get crushed and all of that kind of stuff. So
but we're also seeing that resulting in people leaving the industry, aren't we? So would it be fair to say there's something counterproductive about that approach?
Absolutely. I mean, we're certainly seeing it in crews where, we've got electricians who are kind of tired of being yelled at for 10 hours a day, and they can go and wire some houses and get home at 3 o'clock and have a nice life, actually.
Yeah.
And it's not the same kind of pressure. So we're certainly seeing that in crews, and The pandemic had a lot to do with it as well, I think, that people have kind of done a bit of a reassessment and looking at what they want to do. And while we saw a transfer of people from live events and theatre into the screen sector, we also saw an exodus of people who'd been, veterans of the screen sector and had been around for a long time.
Yeah. Agnes, do you want to comment on
so I was thinking about also job insecurity.
Yeah.
It's different when you work every day at the same office and you come back every day. Then you have a very short film. Films are all prototypes, and so people get to accept things they wouldn't accept if they were working always with the same employers. And also, we have very small companies with no human resources department, so that's how also it's so challenging, I think.
I think you're right about the human resources often, because each film is a startup often, and there aren't human resources sometimes, especially for smaller independent projects. And the expectation is that heads of department will mentor, will train. Nobody's trained them to do that kind of work. They've kind of got great craft skills, but not necessarily have that human resources function. And that can be challenging. Even though they ought to know what their rights and responsibilities are, that may not always be the case. So kind of how do we provide resources so that people feel supported and know what needs to be done?
And so improving access to HR support, guidance, and understanding certain rules around compliance could be a really positive solution to helping those small organisations. Just building on that, it would be good to hear more about the interventions that are already being implemented in your respective nations, or our was the same nation, to improve working practices. Agnes, do you want to kick us off?
Well, I can tell you about what we implemented to fight against sexual harassment and gender-based violence here in France. The Ministry of Culture in 2019 decided we have to make conditions, to implement conditions on all our subsidies at the CNC to certain obligations. That was respecting the labor law on that range. That sounds easy, but still. And there's you have to follow a mandatory training program. The idea is quite the same, in fact, because employers in the sector, they know how to make a film, but they might not know everything about labor law. So the idea is so that everyone was on the same base, on the same page. We built this training program that is really mandatory. You can have subsidies unless you go to this training program. It's a training program that we funded by the CNC. It's free for the employers. It's for business managers only. The one who's responsible for this subject, for the matter, the one who would go to court eventually. And it's specific to their environment. It's we built two, one for the cinema exhibitors and one for the producers, because the risks are different in those industries. It's legal training. It has nothing to do with moral or ethics. It's really only legal. And the trainers, they are all lawyers. That's quite important to say, because that's what people were saying before, that we wanted to go on the moral base. Absolutely not. And today we can see that we have trained 6,000 people, 6,000 employers, in fact. And now we go even further, because we wanted to widen, to amplify these measures. And now it will be mandatory for all still for the employers, but to have their employees follow a training program in two times, one on online, and the other one is on the screen shooting, 2 hours and a half both. Otherwise, they won't be able to get the subsidies. So then the idea is that the wider the law is known, we hope we have less sexual harassment.
So are you seeing a positive shift from those who have been trained already? Has it, what's the more immediate difference that training has made? What have you seen from that?
Well, it's very difficult to know, because it's not because you have more cases that it doesn't work. In fact, you're freeing the voices, so that's why. But the difference is that people say, "I've learned a lot," and that's what I'm gonna do. And also, we work all the sector is working together. There were collective agreements on that subject signed this morning, because we have very strong trade unions that are working a lot on the subjects too. So that's very important to say that all the industry working together, not only the CNC.
Yeah. And Grania, you spoke at the start about some of the interventions that are happening in Australia, but do you want to expand further on those?
Sure, thanks. There's a Screen Industry Code of Practice, which sounds like it's quite like what Agnes has talked about, but it's not mandatory. It is a voluntary thing, and that's provided by Screen Producers Australia. So again, it's for employers to help them to understand, really, to try and create consistency across workplaces. Some commissioning platforms and screen agencies require producers to complete that before they get funding or get greenlit. There have been a number of changes to legislation, though, as well, which is really what's going to change the game, because that is mandatory. So in 2022, there's an amendment to the Sex Discrimination Act requiring employers to eliminate or reduce sexual discrimination within the workplace. 2023, amendments to the Work Health Safety Act that, and this was towards the end of last year, which puts a positive obligation on employers to provide a safe workplace, including psychosafety. And that's going to be the game changer, because that also plays into the kind of the bullying, the harassment aspect as well. So that positive obligation isn't about just dealing with it when it comes up, but actually being making sure that it's provided all the way through and dealing with things before they happen.
And you're talking about legislation there that is pan-economy, isn't it? It's not specific to screen, but...
No, it's all workplaces,
yeah, which is really important.
Yeah.
But how do you help make sure that the screen sector is across that legislation and understands it? Because, as we touched on earlier, sometimes the lack of access to HR support means people just don't know.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the employer. It's like Agnes was saying, it's about making sure that they're aware of what their responsibilities are, especially under this legislation, because, as she said, they'll end up in court if they don't comply with this legislation. And earlier this year, there was another piece of legislation brought in about the right to disconnect, which I think you already have in France, about people, you don't need to answer the phone or do your emails outside of work hours. And so that's being brought in now as well.
That's fantastic. I think there's stuff for us to learn from that, isn't there, Philippa? Over to you.
There are some resources too on the ScreenSafe website, which is a really kind of helpful set of resources that have been done, and that was between the MIA, which is the Media Entertainment and Arts Alliance, which is the crew union as well, and Screen Producers Australia, so consulting with industry around that. And there's a really great set of resources around that, guidelines for screen safety, discrimination guidelines and training resources, intimacy guidelines, COVID safe, all of that kind of stuff. So.
And there's some great templates on there as well, sort of legal templates, which are really impressive. And I have to say, I've referred to that website in the development of our own Good Work programme in the UK. It's great. Philippa, what interventions in the UK?
Yeah, so I think there are a range of things that are really positive that have been going on in the UK. Just to follow on the subject of sexual harassment, we've actually just literally launched a pilot whereby our members can contact us directly on a specific helpline as the first point of call for if they've been bullied or harassed at work. And we're also surveying our members, we haven't done that for quite some time, a few years, just about the experiences they've had and what more support they need in terms of addressing sexual harassment. We know it's a problem, we know it's a global problem. what's been happening in the UK, I think, again, working together, we've been trying to put in place the building blocks of a system that can properly address the issues around bullying and harassment, particularly in the freelance environment. And one of the things that I hope will make a difference is the Creative Industries Independent Standards Authority, which is currently being developed, and we hope will go live later this year, which will provide a place where people can go if there are historical issues, or if there is a specific problem within one organisation. Whether or not it's a panacea remains to be seen, but I certainly think it will help people to feel confident about taking complaints forward. And then obviously we've introduced on the BFI in particular, I've introduced wellbeing facilitators on their productions, and I think that has been a really good initiative to help ensure that where there are issues on a production, that they are addressed in real time, and that people get the opportunity to talk to someone if they're experiencing a problem on a set. So I think that's been a positive initiative. The Film and TV charity have produced their mentally healthy toolkit to try and make sure that productions are aware about the mental health challenges of working in the type of environment we've described. So I think there's lots of brilliant work that is going on. Whether it's yet changing the dial, I think, remains to be seen. Somebody's shaking their head at me over there. I don't think it has yet quite.
Yeah, we know lots more work is needed in this space. I think we all recognise that, as I said at the start. But if there was anything that you felt needed immediate attention, where we could bring about an immediate change, what would it be?
I guess, we at the moment, the environment for people working in film and TV is really difficult. So asking me that question right now, I would probably say we need to find a solution to the feast and famine nature of the industry. But I'm going to put that aside in relation to this conversation and say I think working hours is the issue that we really need to address. We need to, embrace some of the initiatives that have been going on. I forgot to mention Back2 Vision, which is our project in Scotland, have done a really good piece of work around how you could sustain shorter working hours, job sharing on a production, working together with the industry, Screen Scotland and the BBC and others. And I think the next step from that report is to actually trial that on a production somewhere in Scotland. And I think it will prove, I'm pretty convinced it will prove, that actually you get a happier, healthier, more productive workforce if you treat them well and allow them to have some life outside of work.
Well, we know there's correlation between being happy in the workplace and being happy in life more generally. We all know, there's lots of evidence of that. Just going to move us into a slightly different direction now. And this is quite a hard question, I think, but a really important one. And that is, what role do you think a nation's government can play, and you perhaps touched on it a little bit, Grania, but can play in helping to improve working practices to ensure our workplaces are happy, healthy and safe? What can governments do?
I think it's, again, giving a good legal frame. And also, I think more controlling working places. That's the former labor inspector is talking, of course, but I think if we had more controls, it would be better. Maybe the working hours will be better respected. And
is that enforcement? Do you mean labour enforcement?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also maybe implement structuring measures and adapt them to the industry, like what we did for sexual harassment. We special program talking really to the people from the industry with their own words and their specificities.
I think some of the recent workplace reforms that have come in Australia are going to be really helpful, but I think making mandatory some of the requirements for employers so that they really do understand their responsibilities around that. Some, HR or mentoring or training for trainers, so that heads of department who are incredibly skilled in their own practice but don't necessarily have the skills to mentor somebody or understand what that means. We also have a generation of HODs who are aging out and retiring out, so we need that replacement, and we need to kind of tap into their skills to make sure that that's kind of passed on and not lost to the industry when they retire. So I think also and whether it's us or whether it's screen producers producing resources for those really small independent productions, so that it doesn't matter what scale of production you've got access to the same kinds of resources and knowledge, so that you can provide that safe workplace.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, we did a piece of work with the Fabian Society, who sort of worked closely with the Labour Party around the manifesto for the self-employed. So I think we'd like to see better rights for freelancers, access to parental leave, better pension understanding and access, more flexible pension access, and things like that. And I mean, there is a proposal which has come forward recently from the Culture, Media and Sport Select Committee for a freelance commissioner, which we see as a really positive suggestion for someone who actually understands the challenges of freelancing and could perhaps speak on behalf of, or certainly explain some of the challenges to government of working in an industry like this.
Just on the point of freelancers, why do you think our industry uses such a high proportion of freelancers?
Well, I guess it is to do with the project nature of the industry. Is the balance right? Probably not in all circumstances. So I think there are, big broadcasters, film companies, all of those sorts of, big production, studios who could, who actually could employ the workforce on a more permanent basis, but obviously choose not to. And I think, I think we really need to look at that balance between what's actually needed in terms of the balance between employees and freelancers, and what happens in practice. Because I think, I get that employers want a flexible workforce, but they also must take some responsibility for that workforce and not just use them up and spit them out.
Because it's also resulting in people leaving our industry. You've got really good research to show that, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, as I said earlier, it's a really challenging time for people working in film and TV in the UK. A combination of the strikes in the US last year, and then some challenges for the broadcasters in terms of their funding models, have meant that lots of people have been out of work. We did a survey in February which showed not only were a large proportion of the workforce still out of work and hadn't been in work for the best part of a year, but also that many were thinking of leaving the industry. And of course, inevitably, in a situation like that, it's women, the global majority, disabled people, people from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds, who are the ones who are more likely to be leaving because they simply can't sustain themselves.
Do you want to add to that at all, Gráinne? Because actually, I know in Australia you've got an approach now. Am I right in thinking that actually people that work on production on a transient basis are actually put on fixed-term employee contracts? They're not necessarily self-employed. Is that right?
There's a bit of a mix, yeah. So there is still that kind of freelance gig economy that's a large part of the industry. But where there's a pipeline of production, yes, people are being put onto fixed-term contracts and doing it that way, which obviously leads to a different arrangement in terms of rights and responsibilities and that kind of thing, and benefits that you can get to.
Have you seen that aid retention? Or is it
I think it's too early to say at the moment. I mean, I think, when we were looking at when, so many countries post-COVID had that boom in production and the crew shortages, and during COVID, we saw a lot of people who maybe were in very early stages of their career being advanced to roles and pressured to perform those roles when they didn't necessarily have the experience. And so we've had a few years of trying to back them into those roles, so with a bit of on-the-job training and mentoring and that kind of thing, so that they feel supported rather than pressured to perform that when they did it in a time of crisis. There were a lot of people leaving the industry at that time, and there was a real push from the union, from MIA, that rather than bringing in new entrants and again burning them up and spitting them out, as you said, Philippa, that it was what we should be trying to do is attract people back into the industry, into a changed industry with changed working conditions, because they already had this knowledge, they had the skills and the training, and how can we attract them back so that it's a place that they want to work rather than feeling burned out by the whole thing.
No, because we have very few self-employed, because it's illegal in France. You have to be on short-term contracts or long-term contracts, but you have to be an employer. That's in the law. So.
And has that meant that you've retained larger proportions of the workforce in screen, or?
Sorry?
Does that mean you haven't seen such high numbers of people leave the screen sector, or is
no, we don't really have this. What you describe seems quite massive, and we don't have that in France. But you're more protected when you're an employer, of course. And in France, social security and unemployment administration is quite. Okay for the short-term contracts, so you can still stay quite a long time even if you don't work that much.
Yeah, that's great. So this is my last question to the panel before we open out. It's probably quite a hard question. What 3 things do you feel should be standardised across screen production globally to improve working practices across the sector as a whole? Do you want to kick us off, Philippa?
Yeah, I mean, I don't underestimate the challenge of standardising things, but I think there are conversations that certainly we're having through UniMe, which is the global trade union body for crew, around the number one challenge of working hours. And I think that is something that could really change the dial. I mean, we literally, in the last week, didn't we, had that awful situation in the US where a crew member had worked 14 hours driving home and was killed in an accident. And that could happen in the UK, could happen anywhere. If people are working those ridiculous hours and then getting in their cars and having to drive home, then, you know, that is just not acceptable. So I think working hours is something that we can change the dial on, working together to make a more healthy, mentally healthy, but also physically healthy environment. And then I guess we've all talked about the challenges of sexual harassment. I think together we all have to take steps to eradicate the scourge of sexual harassment from our industries, and to really deal with the really sharp power dynamic that there is in this industry, which I think is a large part of why it happens. And finally, I think we need to, in the UK we've had lots of equalities initiatives, but our industry is not equal. There are less women at the top, or throughout crew. We take positive steps in terms of inclusivity of the global majority and people with disabilities and people from different social economic backgrounds, but those do not seem to sustain, and the minute there's a crisis we take steps backwards. So I think that's a really important thing. I think we have the tax breaks for people who produce in the UK, quite generous tax breaks. It's an idea that's been floated before. It's something that I would like to see happen, that those tax breaks are actually linked to diversity targets to make sure that we actually, because I think money talks.
Thank you. Agnes, what 3 things?
We thought together about also, of course I agree about what you say, but we thought about education, about labor law in the schools, so that the young people coming to the sector know their rights and that they have many rights, in fact. And they know about the unions also, they can ask. Sometimes they just don't have the idea. They have to be informed and educated about their rights. You can't claim your rights if you don't know you have any. Well, gender equality, of course, and I think maybe the co-construction of the with the social partners. That's something really global that we all can all do. So that you have labor rules that are very linked to the jobs, the actual jobs in the industry.
Really nice. Gonya.
What they said. I think, having that kind of consistent workplace training program that focus on harassment, bullying, discrimination, bystander laws with the materials customised to those particular roles, and a zero tolerance for harassment. I mean, I heard recently of a production where there was an allegation against a senior production member, and the reaction was, "Oh, that's terrible. We've only got 2 weeks to go, and we really need him." And, come on. Demonstrated commitment to equity, diversity and inclusion is incredibly important, that the screen sector reflects the community that it's in, because it really doesn't yet. And while we're measuring that, we've got a thing called the Everyone Project, where we ask productions to get their crews to sign up to it, so that we can actually track who's on the cruise, who's getting the jobs, so that we can then kind of make interventions to do something about it. I completely agree with you, Philippa. Money talks. We brought in a thing a few years ago that if you're doing a TV drama series with more than one block, at least one of the directors has to be female. Changed the game completely, and it got broadcast credits for a whole lot of female directors. 6 or 8 years later, when we look at, and we track those every year, and I think, it's 2024, surely we don't need that. You look at where we don't have our investment and those TV series, there are no female directors. So, money does talk, and we do have a thing where we won't give you money unless you do this. And then we have other kind of interventions and schemes as well, but that's the thing that makes the difference, is just denying people money unless they comply with whatever that might be.
Thank you. That's our global manifesto for good work, written right there. I think we've got a few minutes now for questions from the audience. Any questions? And I don't know if we've got a roving mic. Yes, thank you.
Hi, my name is Sean from Indie Scene. I'm a white male with a black cap, glasses, short beard, green shirt, and green shorts. My question, and just a few kind of silver linings of good work practices in the UK. How does the BFI feel about the partner organization Northeast Screen recently posting a full-time 37.5 hours film office apprenticeship position at well below the general regional salary? And what is the BFI doing about the lack of accountability in hiring practices, recruitment that it currently operates under? And that could be factors of ageism, disability, experience, gender, location, and international residency.
So on the point of the apprenticeship,
yeah.
I can't comment on the wage that's been issued for that, because actually I don't know about it. But what I will say is that in the UK there are different minimum wage rates for different ages, and that includes a specific minimum wage rate by law for apprentices. So that wage rate cannot be below the legal minimum. But in terms of increasing pay for anyone, I mean, what we would always say is that if people are able to pay more, they should. But I suspect that apprenticeship is in line with the legal minimum wage rate for apprentices in England. We don't control that legislation, of course, but there is all scope for us to work with partners to have conversations about minimum wage rates in our role as conduit between industry and government. So we can certainly look at that. You just have to give me the second question again.
So,
sorry.
Lack of accountability in hiring practices with BFI. I've experienced it firsthand. Other people, so secondhand, dealing with ageism, race, disabilities, international residency as well. Yeah. So it's kind of that accountability. We
have launched a new Good Work programme at the BFI. We're hoping to announce our delivery partner for that programme soon. That programme includes strands of support around improving recruitment practices and supporting inclusive recruitment practices. You're absolutely right. There are huge challenges in the sector around, as I said at the start, how we recruit and therefore who we recruit. So we recognise in our own skills review from 2022 spoke about the importance of changing recruitment practices. So through our Good Work programme, we really hope to start to make a change there. But I think the scale of the task is huge, and that's why we need to work with myriad partners to bring about that change.
And it trickles down to the publicly funded organisations that you
Absolutely. The other thing it might be worth me sharing is that we chair the Creative Industries Council's Good Work Task and Finish group in the UK, and there are a number of actions that are being worked on for the whole of the creative industries that hope to improve good work practices. And actually one of those actions is about reaching a shared consensus across the public funders working across the whole of the creative industries around funding conditions, so that there might be in time shared funding conditions that do some of what's been described here, and that is expect people to demonstrate certain ways of working in order to unlock our funding or have access to our funding. So I hope that helps.
It's a start.
Yeah, thank you. Over there. Lady in a lovely, colourful, super colourful dress. Same haircut. We've got the same hair. We're friends already.
I'm an agent for HODs in the UK.
Yeah.
And I've got a question about basically the film. Obviously, Pat Beck 2, we're dealing with all of that a lot in terms of the agreements. You have the major motion picture one, you have the TV one. We deal with predominantly independent films, everything under 30 million. I mean, we have ones that are over, and it's a wild west. And I guess it's been like that since 2017. The new one, there's no new one for it either. What is going to be done because at the minute for an independent film that's under 30 million, they are cherry picking bits of the TV agreement because they know HODs won't work they want the ACH, they want all these things. But then they're cherry picking some, not picking others. And it's just a mess. And I think we come back to these points where, for example, broken turnaround is worse than it was in 2017 now. So we're seeing it in actual everyday practice, and some things feel progressive and some things feel the other way. So what's going to happen about that?
So we are talking to PACT about those under 30 million budget films at the moment, how far we are away from agreement. It's early days, frankly, but yes, we are having those discussions at the moment. And obviously, from our perspective, the more collective bargaining we can have around terms and conditions, the better. So as well as that, we'd like to have an agreement for unscripted as well at some point, so to make sure that we are addressing those things in discussion with the industry and reaching an agreement.
Any other questions? We've got a chap in the hat at the back, and then I'll come to the gentleman at the front. Thanks.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Thank you. Okay. Hello, I'm Mina Nagar. I'm an actor and a founder of MedFest Egypt, which is a medically themed film festival. We created several initiatives for mental well-being for actors and people working in the filmmaking industry, the festival industry. But I find it interesting when we speak from the governmental institutes having these guidelines that we don't have actually in Egypt. And I was asking, because you mentioned that there was a lot of training programs and curriculums that you created, whether there are chances or a collective that we can do maybe with a community, that we share those curriculums as open sources so we can reuse them in Egypt and maybe create many partnerships with the BFI or France or Australia, just even online, just to make more effective setup, because when you move on the independent scene, it becomes really harder to create this impact. And when we approach the unions, for instance, they don't feel that this is a necessity because money talks.
That's quite a good idea, but still, for example, the training program on sexual harassment, it's based on French labor law and French legal cases. So I think there's some few things we can share, but not everything because of the specificities. But yes, that's quite a good idea still.
But there is like training programs as well for the workers that to actually to cope, rather than it becomes from the law, like the coping mechanism, not necessarily the rights on the legal side, because there is a different set for the psychological effect on the harassment aspect, for instance.
I think there's a really important, I think really what you're saying is, can we take something away and try and figure out a way to make some of the stuff we put in place available globally? I think that's a really good challenge back to us, and something that I think we at the BFI can certainly take away and give more thought to, and hopefully my colleagues can too. So thank you for raising that.
Yes, hi, my name is Benjamin. I'm a white man, mid-40s, I wish. I'm wearing black. I'm a New Zealand filmmaker and have spent most of my life working below the line as a crew member, luckily in makeup departments that were led by women. And in the 90s, before any of the Me Too movement or any of the recent revolutions that have happened for the better, there was still some pretty bad stoushes working in films at that time. I've worked in Australia and New Zealand on international and domestic productions. My question is, you mentioned at the beginning the root cause of a lot of these issues, and myself and my own experience, it is anecdotal, but it tends to be culture, that a male-dominated culture for so many years, the question that was put to bad behaviour in my experience in the 1990s in Australia was that on a female-led film, it's the same crew who don't behave badly. And where is the self-reflection? And I guess my question is, how do you confront the behaviour up close rather than, as the gentleman behind me mentioned, you try and mandate it through money or through government process? It really is a point of, why do you behave this way on a male set? And in recent times, interestingly, it's gotten worse, that fraternity of, okay, times are hard, hours are hard, you tend to bond together and go back to those bad behaviours because it's a boys' club. And I'm kind of wondering if there's any direct confrontation with, especially crew members they just don't know any better, and even some of the lessons in that education seem to be not sinking in.
But I would challenge that they don't know any better if they change their behaviour on a female-led.
That's my point. Yeah,
they do know better. They're making
known.
A choice. So that comes back to the producer or the employer, because they're the ones who are actually accountable for that set behaviour. So rather than it being we would be dealing with, let's say, the producer or whoever is getting the funding. The producer is then the employer or the hirer of the freelance teams or whatever it might be. And they're the ones, if there's a problem, who are going to end up in court because they're responsible for the set. So you're right that it does need to be confronted. That's not an easy thing for anybody to do, but that's people are making a choice. It's not that they don't know better.
I completely agree. Yeah. My last point is that it seems to be a distraction for a male-dominated crew when there's someone is harassed and they complain, and on a female-led crew the experience is a distraction for the bloody harassment, and we're just trying to do a job. And the two mentalities are so far apart. Even now, it can be a bit depressing.
Can I ask a question back? Do you think part of the challenge there, though, is people don't necessarily appreciate the penalties they may incur if they're found to demonstrate some of these behaviours? Because some of what we've been talking about today is actually improving awareness of law, actually. And there are certain penalties in place within our respective systems that mean it will crack down on those, on some, not all, but some of the behaviours you're alluding to. Do you think people in our sector are fully aware of those potential penalties?
Absolutely, I think they are. But as Grania pointed out, they're still going to get away with it because of the urgency.
And because they can.
Yeah. There's 2 weeks to go.
Right.
We've got to finish. They're a professional. We need them. It's just washed over every time, and the difficulty is still the speaking out. I wish I could say that. Yes, everyone is aware. You're absolutely right, and that it still goes on. It's tough.
And actually, that makes me want to ask you a question, Philippa, about your helpline and how busy is it?
So it's literally just been launched, and it's a pilot at the moment. So I sort of hope that the response will build. So we've had some calls already. It's literally been in place about 3 or 4 weeks. We're going to broaden it out to more of our members in due course. But I think once people become more aware that it's there, and that it's hopefully that they have a good experience by getting in touch with us, that yes, more people will use it and more people will feel empowered and not frightened. Because I think certainly in the UK, a huge part of it is, if I make a fuss, people will know about me, talk about me, I won't get another job. So
it's fear culture, isn't it? It's fear culture. Any more questions? I think
just,
we've got...
sorry.
On
that subject, maybe what things are changing. I hope I understood well the question, but in France, what's changing is that the public, the consumer, in fact, don't want to see the films where some of these people are involved. And so now the employers, the producers, realize they really have to do something about it, because otherwise you have the work of 200 people that's just going to the rubbish. No one's going to see the film. And that's a big change, actually. And that's really easier for us to move the producers because we're helping them, making training programs and giving them the tools they don't have, because otherwise the work they did, the money they put in, is just going to the rubbish, really.
So it's affecting the consumer, really, of the end product. Yeah, great. I think we had one more question.
Hi. Thank you. I'm a white woman with long brown hair wearing a red polka dot dress. One of the points I wanted to make was obviously a lot of film projects will cross territories. How do you think nations should work together to ensure that there is some consistency and that workers know what they're coming up against?
Yes, well, I talked a little bit earlier about UNIME, which is a global trade union organisation, and I was actually reminded about some work we did at the ILO last January, a year ago, January, I think. So I think the ILO can play quite a part in terms of addressing some of the priorities. We talked about all of the things that we talked about here. So I think talking across our boundaries is a positive way forward, and sharing experiences, sharing good practice.
I think for screen agencies as well, at Screen Australia, we convene a meeting of all the English-speaking screen agencies. We had one here yesterday where we kind of talk about common issues and obviously training and workforce capacity and issues that are being faced in each country, and they're common across each of those kind of territories. We all share resources, intelligence, what we're finding, what's worked, what research we're doing, all of that kind of thing. Obviously, there's BPX as well, which is for European screen agencies. There's EFAD, and they also share kind of best practice and resources and what are the challenges and how can they kind of solve them together. We certainly look at, when we're developing things in Australia, we look at, what's happening in New Zealand, but we look at what's happening with BFI, with Screen Skills, what's happening in Scotland, in Ireland, and reach out to colleagues about what they're doing or what they're finding in their territories, so that we can learn from that rather than us all starting from a blank page and trying to do the same work and just duplicating that. So there is a lot of learning that we do from each other.
Thank you, and I can confirm I speak to Screen Australia every other month, so we are very closely connected. That just leaves me to... Oh, is there one more question? Sorry.
That's
Go
all
for
right.
it.
Hi, I'm a female in my early 30s, white woman with shoulder brown length hair and a green and white polka polka dot dress. Just out of curiosity and kind of like looking around the room today and seeing predominantly women in this room, and I'm not quite sure who's like watching on the screens, but do you think there is a bit of a challenge of having men taking this topic seriously, especially when they are like leading the gender imbalance in the workplace, and how we can get through to them and make them become our allies, basically?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I mean, it's been interesting, I think, to me that some of the best collaborative work that we have managed to achieve in the UK has been as a result of female-led organisations, film, TV, charity, ourselves, Screen Skills. I could name plenty more. So yes, I think there is something about the way that women work and collaborate together, which is a good thing for this industry, definitely.
I think there's also been that for many years women have been at the forefront of wanting change in the industry. So it doesn't surprise me that women are in that conversation about wanting that positive change. Men need to get involved because if they're the employer, if they're the heads of department, if they've got teams, they're legally bound to know their responsibilities in the workplace, which are changing and evolving, and the expectations of people coming into the industry are vastly different to what they were 30 years ago. So they need to get with the program, or they will end up in court because they're not providing safe workplaces, they're not providing safe work conditions and the appropriate training, and they won't get people working for them because people will choose other industries to work in because who needs to be yelled at for 12 hours a day?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to give a slightly emotional answer to that question, and that is, I might urge men to remember or reflect on how they might feel if their mother, their sisters, their wives were treated badly in the workplace.
Yeah.
And maybe that will bring a bit of change about. I'm going to end there because we're out of time. It just leaves me to say a huge thanks to Gronya, Agnes and Philippa for sharing their insights today, and huge thanks to you, the audience, for engaging with this conversation and giving us some really helpful things to take away, think about and work on. So thank you very much. Collectively, we must aspire to create and distribute the greatest creative content and provide the greatest workplaces and working conditions. I hope we can all work together to do this. Thank you very much.